Listen to what your friend Hafez knows for certain. The appearance of this world is a magic's brilliant trick, though its affairs are nothing into nothing. You are a divine elephant with amnesia, trying to live like an ant. Sweetheart, oh sweetheart, you are God in drag. So there's a little bebop 50s song about one of our favorite words, right? Surrender. It's right up there with obedience. Right up there, right? Ooh, man. And so that's what we're talking about today as we finish up our sacred yes. Part of our sacred yes is the yes that we say to this divine power and presence, surrendering to it, maybe. Surrendering something to allow it to move through us, maybe. Maybe we think about surrendering a little differently than we grew up with in surrender. Certainly for me, when I was growing up, surrender was coupled with the notion of God's will. And it always seemed to me that God's will was the reason for why crappy things happen to people. That is actually how it was used. When I was growing up, somebody got ill, they lost their job, they lost a child. It was God's will, and we just have to trust that everything's okay. And it seemed as though, I don't know, I wasn't certain I could trust God's will. And if I surrendered to God's will, somehow it seemed like there was a whole laundry list of bad things that were going to happen to me. And yet we know that one of the deepest prayers there is to pray is, thy will be done. Just as we sung earlier, thy will be done. And in the science of mind, we take that up, perhaps in a new way, perhaps a little differently. And so we want to dive into that. What are we surrendering? And what are we surrendering to? So, we want to start then with something that's really been on my mind and in my heart over the last couple of years in my own spiritual practice, in my own deepening with our form of affirmative prayer, spiritual mind treatment, and the thing that I've been obsessing about in my own spiritual work over the last couple of years. And it is the place of where being and becoming meet. The place where being and becoming meet. You see, in the science of mind, we spend a lot of time focusing on the being of the divine, that divine reality, that infinite oneness, that perfect beingness that is the ground of all being. And then we also focus on that we can become more of who we are, that we can create a life of our dreams, that we can become who we came here to be. And yet we recognize that that beingness that we are is actually the truth. So we are both being and becoming. Why? Couldn't we just be perfect? Really? Right? I mean, this growth thing, it's a little wearing. It's a little tiring sometimes. One wonders, will it ever end? Will we ever get some place where we can say, okay, I've actually healed that thing, or I've grown into a new understanding, or I've become, I have become who I came here to be. Being and becoming, two sides of the same coin. In the Tao Te Ching, we find this verse. This is verse 42. The one begot two, the two begot three, and the three begot the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things carry yin and embrace yang. They achieve harmony by combining these forces. The one infinite reality, the one infinite isness, the being that is whole, perfect, and complete in every way, that is the potentiality for all things, that is the pregnant void, as it's called in Hinduism, from which the possibilities emerge, the creative womb of life itself. This one isn't anything yet. It is simply the possibility for all things, the potential for all things, the absolute perfect reality. That one begot two, the love and the law, presence and principle, cause and effect. The one begot two. The two begot three, spirit, soul, and body, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. So many ways in which we understand the two begot the three, and the three begets the 10,000 things. The word for creation, the 10,000 things, the multiplicity of life itself in form, in creation. And this whole process is eternally going on from one to multiplicity. Why? Why is this happening? Why is it going on? Why can't God just be God? Life just be life, and just be itself? Because that's not enough. Do you see? An infinite reality that is infinitely being, that is the infinite possibility and potential for absolutely everything, that is the universal spiritual laws of creation itself, is nothing yet. Ernest Holmes says this creation, the manifest body of God, is the logical and necessary outcome of Spirit's self-knowingness of itself. So being isn't enough. Being requires becoming for expression, for fullness, for fulfillment. Becoming is the fulfillment of the infinite. Without it, the infinite isn't infinite somehow. Does your brain hurt yet? I have been contemplating this for 2 years in my spiritual work. How can the infinite not be infinite? What does it need from creation, from expression? In The Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes wrote, mind is individualized, but never individual. The mind which is universal will never be any less than universal. It will never be individual. But it will be individualized. There is a great difference. The wave in the ocean will never be a wave by itself. It will be the ocean as a wave. And when you think about the many faces of the ocean, isn't it its changeability that makes it so beautiful? Right? Sometimes it's crashing with the storm. Sometimes it's metallic and you're waiting for the storm to break. Other times it's smooth as a lake, reflecting a beautiful sunrise, and everything in between. And the ocean, in and of itself, is perfectly lovely, but it is actually the waves that make it beautiful. And our getting to experience that changeable nature of that thing which is always present. The wave can never be a wave by itself. It is the ocean as a wave. And so this dance of being and becoming, if we can imagine, the ocean is forever expressing itself through all of these various waves. Otherwise, what is it doing? It's just flat and sitting there. Nothing going on. And do you know that it is the action of the waves crashing upon the shore that make for the place where life arises? It is in that turbulence. That is the place of creation on the planet. It is the richest place. It's got the richest biodiversity. It's got the richest ecosystems in that very place where the waves are crashing upon the shore. So maybe the waves are required for the ocean to express itself, for the ocean to be all that it can be, and to become life. Do you see, we understand that this is the whole trajectory of the evolution of the universe. Its entire trajectory is this possibility for life, for this infinite beingness to express itself, to be fulfilled, to create all of the creations that are possible, so that the infinite nature of the oneness can be expressed infinitely. Because without an infinite expression, the infinite nature of the oneness is unfulfilled. And this is where you and I come in. And this is where we begin to be able to see this nature, to see this reality. So if you go back to the ancient traditions in the West, all the way back to the mystics and shamans 5,000 years ago that were then written down into the Hebrew Bible, they had a deep understanding. And they created a story, an allegory. God said, let there be light, and there was light. And let there be the firmaments and the waters and the lights in the heavens and the earth and the plants and the animals and all of that in beautiful succession, just exactly the way that we now understand evolution happened. And in each and every case, at every stage along the way, what is said? And God said, it is good. It is good. Every expression, every part of the universe, of the physical creation is good. Now, I don't think that good is good as in a value judgment, good or bad. I think that good is the good of the explosion of being into becoming. The explosion of life into expressing itself. The joyous delight that the isness of God takes in becoming all of these possible things. Just imagine a rose bush, drawing from the earth everything that it needs, from the sun and the rain. There's an essence of life itself that is moving. And then there are no buds and no blossoms. Do you see the rose bush is unfulfilled because it is unexpressed? But when it has buds and blossoms, each one of them unique and precious and beautiful, having nothing to do with the rose that came before or the rose that will come after. And do you see that rose bush blooms year after year after year, and all of those blossoms are necessary for that rose bush to express itself, to become all that it could be inherently as a rose bush. All of creation, all of the manifested body of God required for the delight of the infinite to express itself. And so if we imagine this this infinite reality simply being, do you see, it's unfulfilled. And so that impulse into creation, in the science of mind, we understand that it wasn't a moment in time. It didn't happen. It is eternally going on. That impulse to express is forever going on because it is an infinite nature that is being expressed. And that impulse of expression, imagine an infinite reality exploding into form and saying, it is good, it is good, it is good, it is good. We call that love. Love is the beginning and end, the impulse in nature that will not be denied. It's written in the science of mind. Love is the principle of life, for it is the nature of everything to give, because that is the nature of life itself, of the divine reality, to give itself into creation as creation, to become creation so that it can be all that it is. Being and becoming, two sides of the same coin. So, then we come to the question, what is the will of God? What is the will of God? And if we have followed this process in our hearts, and if we have experienced it, and we recognize that the impulse itself for being to become is love, then the will of God is always in alignment with its own nature. God cannot will anything other than its own nature. And the will of God is the spontaneous nature of God everywhere. Everywhere. The spontaneous nature of the divine. So let's think about what do we think we know about the divine? The qualities of this being that is the absolute. And we call it love and peace and harmony, joy and abundance, prosperity, wholeness, health, beauty, order, harmony. Do you see? And so the very nature of God, the very nature of this one beingness, creation can be nothing but an outpicturing of the nature of the divine. The will of God is its own nature being expressed. So what are we surrendering to? What are we surrendering to when we say, relax and let go, surrender? Well, we're surrendering to this idea that the will of God is always good. And so maybe it's more important to ask, what are we surrendering up? What are we laying on the altar of our spiritual practice and letting go of? Our limitations, our false beliefs, our beliefs that we are bound by the human condition. Perhaps we're surrendering up a false idea about life, surrendering that which stands between us and this experience of the truth of who we are. And what if we truly surrendered to the idea that the will of God was always good? Well, first of all, we'd have to let go of our story, wouldn't we? Well, that's annoying. I have to let go of all my excuses, all my reasons why it doesn't work, can't work, won't work. I have to let go of all my blame, all my shame. I have to let go of all the ways I need for you to be different. I have to let go of anything that keeps me from seeing and being that good. surrendering to the will of God invites me to be the truth of who I am. The individualized expression of the one itself, fulfilling itself as me, as you. Not becoming more of that, but discovering that that is who we are, and that our whole life is the expression of that, to become that in form, just as the divine is becoming that in the universe. If we truly surrender to the idea that the will of God is always for good, we should then interpret the will of God, Ernest Holmes says, to be everything that expresses life without hurt. This seems to be a fair, logical, sane, and intelligent criteria. Anything that will enable us to express greater life, greater happiness, greater power, so long as it does not harm anyone, must be the will of God. Because it is for greater growth, greater love, greater expression, greater delight in life, as long as it harms no one, takes from no one. That is our surrendering to that good and then allowing it to work us, to align ourselves with it. This is the seed of the point of our whole spiritual practice, right? Is to align the inner and the outer, to align that divine presence that we know is the truth of who we are, to align that with our actions, our words, the ways in which we show up, and to align that with the greater good that is the universe itself. Everything working to bring that alignment about, that congruence. And so then when we say, thy will, the will of God, do you say we are claiming the nature of God as moving us? Not as a divine hand that comes down and says, oh, I'm so sorry that you're in trouble. I'm going to help you. Or, you're going to be in trouble. That's not a very good thing to do. Let me punish you. No. An alignment with the truth of who we are. Do you see? And then we are standing in the fulcrum where our individualized humanity is in alignment with the nature of the divine. And then we come to the age-old question. This is the reason Martin Luther nailed his 95 Thesis on the door of the church, of the Catholic Church. We do not need an intermediary between us and God. We don't have to pay to get into heaven. We don't have to pay for prayers. We can do this ourselves. We can have a direct relationship with the divine. Science of Mind, we say we have a direct revelation of truth. Nothing stands between us and God. And of course, what was the response of the Catholic Church at the time? Well, how do you know that it's you? And how do you know it's God you're listening to and not the devil? That was their response. And so what do we do in the Science of Mind and in New Thought? Well, we know better than to think about the devil. So what we say is, well, how do I know it's me and not my ego talking? How do I know that's my big self and not my little self? We've just substituted ego for devil. You realize that, right? And then we make the ego wrong, and then we do battle with it, and then we're locked into that kind of a experience. But do you see, the whole point of spiritual practice is to recognize that our egoic structure is the thing that allows us to be disciplined enough to move into right alignment, and that we are moving into right alignment with the nature of the divine, which is seeking to express as us as much as it is seeking to express as the rose and the sequoia tree and the star and the galaxy. Do you see? And then there's congruence. And then I can say, my will and thy will is the same will. And I don't have to do battle with my little self. Hafez says this. He says, you are the sun in drag. You are God hiding from yourself. Remove all the mine, that is the veil. Why worry about anything? Listen to what your friend Hafez knows for certain. The appearance of this world is a magic's brilliant trick, though its affairs are nothing into nothing. You are a divine elephant with amnesia, trying to live like an ant. Sweetheart, oh sweetheart, you are God in drag. That is the divine nature. That is the truth of who we are. And our job is to align with it, to move with it, to discover that divine nature and how it is moving in the world and as us. And then this is what I usually do, paddle upstream. Because of course, I know. I know. I know where I should be going and what I should be doing, and I have actually figured it out, and that's what it looks like. I see there is absolutely no recognition in the room for this state. It must be completely me that it does this. Okay, so now that I've completely revealed myself, right? And we get to do this. We do actually get to do this. And if where you need to go to, if you're a fur trapper and where you need to go to sell your furs is upstream, you can actually paddle upstream. But, ooh, man, it's hard work. And when we are discovering life and the will of God, do you see, we want to place ourselves in the stream of life. Now, sometimes that stream of life, like the salmon, actually does, in fact, seem to pull us upstream. The salmon, as they are, right, following their trajectory, are pulled upstream. Not always a good thing. Not always a good thing. Good for the bear. See? Now see? Because we are part of the divine nature, we can actually see, we can look at this and see what's going on. Lessons, growth, opportunities. Opportunities to not believe that we are the salmon. What if in an instant we recognize we're the bear? What if we recognize we're the ecosystem in which the two of them exist in perfect harmony? Do you see? It's all in where we stand, our locus of identity, and what we cling to. Are we clinging to the wave, or are we allowing the ocean to be the wave? Hafez says this: love wants to reach out and manhandle us, break all our teacup talk of God. If you had the courage and could give the beloved his choice, some nights he'd drag you around the room by your hair, ripping from your grip all those toys in the world that bring you no joy. Love sometimes gets tired of speaking sweetly and wants to rip to shreds all your erroneous notions of truth that make you fight within yourself, dear one, and with others, causing the world to weep on too many fine days. God wants to manhandle us, lock us inside a tiny room with himself, and practice his drop kick. The beloved sometimes wants to do us a great favor, hold us upside down and shake all the nonsense out. But when we hear he is in such a playful, drunken mood, Most everyone I know quickly packs their bags and hightails it out of town. What if we were to surrender to being manhandled? What if we were to surrender to being drop-kicked so that our nonsense can be shaken out of us? Our nonsense, our limiting beliefs, our beliefs in the past, our fixation on our story, the nonsense that we tell ourselves about who we are and what we're up to. What are we surrendering to? Not a will of God that requires suffering. In the Science of Mind, it's written, we need not bother as to whether or not God's will is that we shall suffer. Limitation and suffering are not imposed upon us by the deity. They are the result of ignorance. Insofar as we express ourselves rightly in accord with the divine harmony, the divine self goes forth anew into expression through us. We are avenues through which God comes more completely into fruition. Each of us a wave on the ocean, a rose on the rose bush. Every one of us, a place where the nature of God is being expressed and fulfilled. This is Ralph Waldo Emerson. He says, the whole course of things goes to teach us faith. We need only obey. There is guidance for each of us, and by lowly listening, we shall hear the right word. Place yourself in the middle of the stream of power and wisdom which flows into you as life. Place yourself in the full center of the flood, then you are without effort impelled to truth, to right, and a perfect contentment. Do you see the will of God when we are doing our spiritual practice, releasing the limited false beliefs, letting go of the projections and judgments and all the nonsense? Do you see what we find there is the indwelling being that is becoming as us, that is expressing and fulfilling itself as us? And then the will of God is the outpicturing of the very nature of the divine as us. And then we stand in that place. And do you see, when we teach spiritual mind treatment, our form of affirmative prayer, this is the whole point of the beginning of our prayer. This is the whole point. And over the last 2 years, I have spent more time in the first 2 steps of spiritual mind treatment than I have in the others, because this is where the magic happens. This is where the work is done. The recognition of the nature of God. Wholeness, health, beauty, truth, joy, whatever it is, the recognition of the nature of God. And the recognition that life itself, the universal creation and physical expression, is God fulfilling itself. Spirit is forever in this dance of the being and the becoming. And because we are the place where that's awakening, that's recognizing that this is what's happening, we are now participating in that dance of being and becoming. And when we recognize that, do you see, we have instantly unified ourselves, the individualized expression of being and becoming, with a macrocosmic truth of the nature of God. And the will of God is what we speak in our treatments. The expression of the rose, perfect, whole, and complete. The reality of abundance, or health, or joy, or peace. Do you see, we then express that truth and align every bit of life to the outpicturing of that. And what a joy that is, to know it, to claim it, to accept it, to surrender anything unlike it. And then, do you see, when we say, "Thy will be done," it's the gift. Perfect love. And then we can ride the waves. Do you see? Then we ride the waves. And we play in the sand, and we let the little waves lap at our toes. And we get our canoe out, and we play in the big waves, and we learn to surf the really big ones. And yes, absolutely, every once in a while, crash. And we learn, and we live, and we joyously experience and express who we truly are. Because it is the nature of the divine being us. Do you see? And then we can surrender to whatever waves we are having to dance with. And we surrender to the divine nature of God as us. Let us pray. And so we take a breath, and we do go into that recognition of life, of the divine reality, the impulse of creation, the possibility for love and joy, the potentiality for everything. And we are not fooled. We see this as the ground, the impulse of life. And we have to look no further than our own backyard and the eyes of our beloved, our children, people who are seeking to operate in integrity. Do you see, everywhere we look, we can see evidence of this truth. That there is an infinite love, an infinite life, and it is forever moving in creation, as creation. Everything is required for the one to be itself in its fullness. And so then we come to you and I, and we realize that we are the ocean being this individual wave. The rose bush being this individual rose, blooming for all we're worth, giving our gift, being who we are, becoming more of that all the time. And so this morning in this prayer, right here, right now, let us surrender every false belief, every limitation, everything that separates us from this truth. That the ocean and the wave are one. That our life is a life to be lived rich and joyous, so that the divine may be fulfilled. And because we know this truth about ourselves, this morning we accept this reality, we claim this reality for every person. Everyone, regardless of the human condition. That we surrender our fear and doubt that this human condition is actually the truth. Because we know it's not. And so we surrender ourselves this morning into the nature of God, allowing it to have its way with us, allowing it to move as us, through us in the world, showing up as love, as peace, as harmony. And I claim for each and every one of us that as we do so, we lift consciousness as a whole. Not only is our life changed, but all life is changed. For the will of God is always good. Accepting this truth, I relax, I let go, I surrender, and I let it be. And so it is.